Welcome to yet another episode of On VJ's Playlist. And today we have Gurgaon-based Saptak Chatterjee, as you may know, is one of the few Indian musicians out there who is a classical virtuoso. But that's not all. There's an interesting way that he delves into Indian classics, Indian classical music. He mixes progressive rock and a lot of electronic sounds in his compositions. Saptak, welcome. It's such a pleasure to have you on VJ's Playlist. I'd like to
Thank you
begin by
so
asking
much.
how you're doing.
Very well, very well. This morning has been productive. Well, it's only 11 o'clock, but it's been productive till now. And it's very good to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, thank you so much for taking the time out to do this with me early in the morning. I'm not sure how enterprising and how exciting is it an idea to give an interview the first thing in the morning, but thank you so much for doing this.
No, I love talking. So I'm always up for an interview any time of the day.
That's lovely to hear. Saptak, I want to quickly begin by firstly congratulating you on Aina. What a beautiful song. It's one of my favorite compositions of the year so far. And
Thank you so much.
It's so beautifully immersive and extremely expressive. Before we get to further knowing about your musical influences and about your musical journey so far, I want to quickly begin by talking about Aina. What were you thinking, or what was the thought process there? Do you want us to quickly take us down through creating this beauty of a track that you did?
Sure, I'd love to. So basically, the Japanese culture, there's a very popular proverb in the Japanese culture which says every human being has three faces. One face that the world sees, one face that only the close friends and family members see, and one face that only you can see. And that is pretty much what you see when you look into the mirror. And that's the truest face that you will ever see. So Aina is literally talking about that last third face that we all get to see when we look into the mirror. Because symbolically, that reflection that we see in the mirror is the only thing that will be with us till the very end. It was there when we started this journey. It will be there on the last day when we're just about to end this life. And no matter how much we try to sort of, mask our pain, our happiness, our grief, sorrow, whatever it is, we can hide it from everybody else, but not that reflection in the mirror, because the mirror sees it all. The mirror understands everything without having to speak to it, without having to say anything to it, explain anything. Which is why the chorus says, Aina दिखता है चुपचाप सारी चीजें आईना सिर्फ तू समझे कहे बिना, which is basically saying you see everything silently and you understand everything without having to explain anything.
It's very interesting.
That's pretty much.
Yeah, it's very interesting you say that, Saptak, because I believe that it's just so apt that the mirror is a metaphor here for an alter ego, or your own self sometimes being your biggest critic and looking back at you and saying that hey, if you feel that nobody's watching you,
absolutely.
I am watching you. You're watching yourself. So don't feel like you're not being seen or not being watched, because your own self is watching you. So it's a very, very beautifully reflective track, literally and figuratively. I want to first begin by before we dissect the track any further, I want to first begin talking about your influences, Saptak. It's very interesting that someone who has been classically trained in Hindustani classics chooses a much more contemporary, a much more westernized approach to ensure that he reaches out to his audience and entertains his audience with a touch of tradition, of course, but also keeping in mind the modern aesthetics that the listeners are, kind of accustomed to. So when you had to adopt this approach, how did you ensure that you were going to hit the sweet spot?
So, I am from a family of classical musicians. My grandfather is a classical vocalist, and my father was also a classical vocalist. Now, basically, in all the years that I was growing up and training under them, my father used to always tell me that. So, there's a very widely prevalent saying that if you can sing classical music, you can sing anything. So, my father sort of took that saying and told me that that's not entirely true. But what it basically means is that if you understand classical music, if you learn to uh, appreciate it, learn to understand it, and have the knowledge surrounding classical music, it will get drastically easier for me to understand and pick up any other style of music and understand it. I might not particularly be able to sing, say, opera right now, but if an opera singer were to explain what it is, what the fundamentals are, it would not take me any time at all to understand it. The reason for that is because my training has fundamentally cleared everything, all the core essentials of music, not just classical music, but music as a discipline. So as I entered college, I started working with a lot of non-classical musicians, guitar players, drummers, um, bass players, pianists, all across the board. And that's when I sort of realized what my father used to tell me, that if you understand classical music, there is no style that you won't understand. Whether you can execute it or not is a different matter, but you will always understand it. And once I started understanding it, I started trying to execute it, to sing a different style, to have a different approach. I started listening to a lot of different kinds of music, a lot of different styles of music. And then thought, let's see if I can sing like that. So tomorrow, if you call me to a studio and ask me to say sing 4 lines in a very, very classical approach, and then sing it in a very straight, modern pop approach, I'll be able to do both only because over the years I've experimented, tried, mostly unsuccessfully. But those few times when it has been successful are the songs that have gone on to release or be used in an OTT show or whatever it is. Basically, the point being that I had to really experiment a lot, really try. In fact, even now, there is this new thing that I'm doing on Instagram, which is basically every Monday I put a cover of a song that I really love. But it's not just a cover; it's I recreate the whole track from scratch. I don't use a karaoke. I don't use just a ukulele or a guitar or a piano. I recreate the entire track from scratch. I produce it, I mix it, I master it, and then I sing over it. Now I make sure that every track I choose is different. The first track that I chose was a very semi-classical track. The next track that I chose was completely electronic. It had no normal vocals at all, but I sort of added my own twist to it. The third song that I chose again was a very, very pop, contemporary, as pop as it gets. And then the fourth track that I put up a few days back, that was completely different. It wasn't even classical. It was something very, Middle Eastern. So it's just that, I know that I have to be versatile, and I really want to be versatile, not just because commercially it's useful, but also because deep down, I always go back to what my father said, that if I understand classical music, I will understand everything else. Then it's up to me whether I want to try and also execute it. So now I'm at the execution stage. I'd like to believe I've understood a lot of things, but now I'm trying to execute as many of those things as I can.
It's wonderful that something that your father told you as a musician has, proved to be such a valuable life lesson that you've been inculcating throughout your personal journey as a musician and as an individual. But do you have a vivid memory of your first ever performance? In your immediate circles, and when I say immediate circles, I mean amongst family or amongst your school friends or teachers that you hold very dear to you, and that kind of emboldened your belief that somewhere your calling lies in music.
Huh. So, there are quite a few instances, but the one that I always like to talk about, because it's sort of partly cute and partly nice to reminisce about, is when I was very, very young, when I was a kid, I was a child. I used to have this party trick, and it's only now that I realize it used to be a party trick. Back then, it was just normal for me. So I, it's very fascinating. When I was say 4, 5, 6 years old, I never sat down with my father or grandfather to learn because they would always be practicing at home. I would attend their concerts. Students would come over and learn. Most of what I picked up till I was say 9 or 10 years old was all because I heard it constantly. It wasn't because I was made to sit down and learn. I just learned it by listening to it. And somehow I got really good at sargams, solfege, notations. All three things mean the same. So the party trick was that basically what happened is one day my parents and I were going to McDonald's. This is way back in, I don't know, I think 1998 or 1999 when I was 3 or 4 years old. My parents and I were going to McDonald's using a bus because we didn't have a car back then. So buses have these tunes playing on those cheap quality speakers, no? So some, I think Kuch Hota Hai or something was playing. And this is what I'm told that Kuch Hota Hai was playing. And I, instantly started singing.
If you're talking about 98, 99, then yeah, that was when Kuch Hota was trending. So definitely.
Yeah, I mean, either was one of SRK's movies, some DDLJ Kuch Hota Hai types. So, and I instantly started singing the same song in sargams. And, it's not normal. And my parents were, they were shocked, is what they tell me. They said that because my dad never taught me to do that, I just somehow picked it up. So, and then they realized that, okay, maybe he can do this with any song. And then they started giving me random songs. So some cartoon soundtracks, some old classical songs, some old semi-classical song. And I could do that with every song.
They basically tried to milk the juice, the milk.
Yeah, as much as possible. Yeah, it's the only sad thing is that my parents weren't business minded, so we couldn't get anything out of it. But everywhere I used to go, any party, any social gathering, anything, uh, the family friends would just play a song and go like, "Iska sargam karo." हाँ चलो बेटा इसका सरगम करके दिखाओ and I would do it because I was a kid. I didn't know any better. हाँ बिल्कुल. So that's one thing. The other thing is, of course, when I was in school, we used to have assembly every morning. And, bhajans and semi-classical songs every morning. So I started singing, and then, the music faculty at my school realized that, okay, I can sing. So then I started going for competitions, and my friend circle started realizing that, okay, this is not just a hobby for him. He's pretty serious about it. So it's interesting because even in school, some of my closest friends used to tell me that, okay, music is just your hobby, right? So what are you going to do after school if you decide? And I used to always tell them that I don't think it's just a hobby. I think this is what it is. This is what I'm going to do. So yeah, I'm glad it worked out.
Who would have thought an SRK song from one of his films would actually fuel the fire, but or rather should I say ignite the spark? But wow, Saptak, but who are some of the musicians that you grew up listening to, who you call your influences?
So in the classical world, of course, my dad is there. Ustad Rashid Khan, Pandit Rajanand Sajan Mishra, a lot of classical artists. But in the non-classical sphere, again, the usual. There's A.R. Rahman, there's Shankar Ehsaan Loy. Back in the day, there was, Vishal Shekhar. Their initial day albums.
Yes.
And a lot of KK back then.
Yeah.
So, this is basically what I sort of heard while I was in primary school. And I was still not listening to anything which was English back then because, just somehow we didn't, because I was from a classical background and the system of Spotify and Apple Music and iPod and all was still not there. So to listen to, say, a Beatles or a I don't know, something like that, a Pink Floyd, you would actually need either of those big vinyls, or you need a cassette, something like that. But all the CDs and cassettes that we had were all classical music. So technically
It's interesting you say that, because I was actually, as you speak, the next question I was actually thinking of is, so what was your immediate exposure to the Western, Western school of music, which eventually
yes.
you came into, which you would eventually blend with your Indian aesthetics. So what was your immediate exposure to the Western school of music?
You remember Apple launched their iPod Nano way
Yeah,
back.
back
So
somewhere late 2000s. Yeah,
yeah, I think 2004, 5, 6,
yeah.
sometimes.
I
So
think between
that's
6
when
and
I
9 it was a rage. Yeah.
yeah, so that's when I bought my parents bought me an iPod Nano, and that's when I first downloaded a Linkin Park song. So the first
Ah,
ever song that I heard, which was not Indian classical or not Hindi film, was Numb by Linkin Park. It was the first
I was
ever
about
song.
to ask, was it number, was it in the end? Because those
No,
were
it
very
was it
famous.
was yeah, it was Numb. That was the first ever song I remember I heard ever heard, and of course it blew me away. It blew the whole world away. But me listening to something like that for the first time just left me speechless. Once that happened, then of course I started exploring. We had a PC back then, computer, and we had internet. What, 2G or 1G? I think back then I don't even remember. It was so long back. But yeah, I started torrenting songs, bands. Started downloading a lot of music. Started listening to it, and then eventually, as I reached high school, class 10th, 11th, 12th, that's when I started listening to the Western School of Music very, very seriously. So I started off with, again, Pink Floyd, the usual, the classics, Pink Floyd, Beatles, even if you go even older than Rolling Stones, your Elton Johns, your Michael Jacksons, and all of those artists. And that then eventually I sort of branched out to more contemporary pop, R&B, hip hop, uh, rock, and all of that. So, but yeah, that's when it started with the iPod Nano.
Do you ever recall the first ever live performance, or the first ever, moment where you walked up to the stage, you took to performing to a large crowd, to a crowd, standing there right before you, and what would have been your state of mind in that time? Of course, the uncertainty, the the self-doubt, a thousand emotions would have overwhelmed you at that point of time. But do you recall the first time you actually performed to a live audience, and what was the reception back then?
So when I was a kid, I used to go for a lot of competitions. My parents would sign me up for a lot of competitions. So I know a competition is not a professional performance, but it still requires you to perform in front of a crowd. So I distinctly remember the Durga Puja competitions. I used to live in CR Park, and Durga Puja is a very big thing in CR Park. It's a Bengali area.
It can't get more Bengali than that if you're from Delhi, right? CR Park.
Yeah, yeah. So I very fondly remember the competitions that I used to go for, and so tons of competitions over the years. I must have participated in almost 30, 35 competitions in 4 or 5 years. But as far as a professional performance is concerned, I think my first performance ever was in my school, because once I reached first standard, or I think second standard, my school knew, the board knew that my father is a classical vocalist. So first they asked him if he would like to perform, and then he said, "Sure, I'll perform, but I'd like you to give my son a chance first." I was a 5-year-old probably, and I performed. I still have the photos. I don't have videos because we didn't have a camera back then. But I still have photos from that performance, and it was a huge auditorium that our school had back then. It was called Aspiration Hall. And I performed. There was I think there must have been 500, 600 people. But those were all students and parents and teachers and the staff and board members. And I think I must have performed for 15 minutes. That's it, just 15 minutes. But pictures, even now when I look at those pictures, it's very fascinating, because uh, Yeah, I mean, from what my parents tell me, I got on stage, I sang, and I thanked everybody, and I got off. There was no moment of nervousness, or I wasn't crying, or nobody had to sort of give me encouragement. I just did it because I knew I had to do it. So yeah, and when I was a little, say, when I was in high school, the first ever performance again that I had was a classical concert that happened in Gurgaon in an auditorium called Epicenter. Again, huge auditorium, lots of people, some 600 odd people. And yeah, it was a full 1.5 hour concert, classical concert. And by the end of it, I was sweating so much because, when you're a kid, you don't realize what's at stake. You don't feel nervous. It's a different kind of nervous then. But when you're older, you realize that your reputation is at stake. People are here to listen to you. They might be critiquing you. They might be judging your performance. I was sweating so much. I was so nervous that at some point my grandfather threw a handkerchief onto the stage that ye lo isse pasina saaf kar lo, because you're sweating
That's
so
so
much.
cute.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, these are some of the concerts that I remember. Initial concerts.
So let's look at it this way. So whenever a moment of doubt does tend to kind of take you a little on the back seat, you always you fall back to that beautiful childhood memory that you have, don't you?
Oh yes, yes, of course, of course. I mean, so usually what happens, and it's a widely known fact, that in our field, not giving up is the toughest job. Right? It's not making a hit song. It's not earning a lot of money. It's not giving up. It's showing up every day despite the problems. So whenever I face something like that, I tell myself that all those years back when I was 4 or 5 years old, I started doing this. So I cannot possibly stop doing it now. I mean, I started from there, and now this is where I've reached. Whatever my accomplishments right now might be, good, bad, small, big, whatever it is, I've still come a very long way from that instance. Traveling in a bus with my parents and singing the Sargam of Kuch Kuch Hota Hai. So if I could reach here from there, then there's definitely a lot more that I can do from here. So, and if I give up, then I leave all of that untouched, unexplored, undone. So yeah, I that's what I tell myself when in doubt.
That's extremely inspiring and very motivating, I must say, Saptak. But when you start bringing a certain genre into the sensibilities in a city like Delhi, where Punjabi music, a lot of the street music, hip hop, so much, most of that is what dominates the Delhi music culture. Um, and in such scenarios, the Indian classical is quite a niche thing, you could say. There, nobody's saying that there's not an audience for it. Of course, there's an audience, but that audience, in your opinion, do you think does it get limited, or do you think that because you bring in your Western sensibilities into it, it's kind of in a way experimental, and it also gives you a lot of room to kind of explore your soundscape further?
So, I have never treated classical music as something that I will only mix with other genres.
Yeah.
I am, classical music is one vertical of what I do professionally. So when I'm not doing classical, I try and make sure that I'm not doing it at all. Because personally, and this is just a very personal take, I don't like to be called a fusion artist. I don't like to be put in that space of fusion at all. I mean, nothing annoys me more.
Do you even prefer being bracketed under a genre? That would be the more. I mean, that's
see, if somebody were to say I'm a singer songwriter, I'm good with that. If somebody says, what Saptak songs are in the pop rock space, I'm happy with that. But the moment somebody says it's fusion, I mean, nothing annoys me more, because if I'm fusion, then Arijit Singh is also fusion.
Ouch.
Yeah, I mean, it's true, because all the reasons why people would call me fusion are all the things that Arijit Singh, Shankar Ehsaan Loy, A.R. Rahman have been doing since the past so many years, decades. So if I'm fusion, then they're fusion. And if they are pop and rock, then I'm pop and rock. It's as simple as that. The only difference is मेरे गाने अभी तक films में नहीं सुने लोगों ने, right?
अरे
That's the only
ऐसे
difference.
मत बोलिए आप बकायदा म्यूजिक डायरेक्टर बने हैं डिज्नी हॉटस्टार के एक फ्रैंचाइज
हाँ,
के.
correct. But I'm saying, so see, now you are one of the few people who has that understanding and sensibility, and you can really, see what all is happening. But a common person on the street might not know this.
Yeah.
So for them, saying, "Arey, ye to fusion hai," is very convenient and very easy. So that is one reason why I always try to not bring classical music into the independent music that I release. Not because I don't want to be, not just because I don't want to be termed fusion, but also because I feel every style of music has its own space. And unless and until a song that I'm making really needs, say, a sargam here, an alap there, or needs some sort of classical influence, I will not use it.
Right.
For example, if I were to make a song like Phir Le Aaya Dil from Barfi, there, of course, I will bring in my Hindustani classical sensibilities and influence. But if somebody were to ask me to write a song like, oh God, any other song, like some Chennai Express song, any song from Chennai Express, for example, then I will not, because perhaps bringing in a classical influence would be counterproductive.
Yeah.
So that's how I think now, that if a song calls for it, I will tap into my classical music sensibilities. If it doesn't call for it, just because I know classical music, I will not use it. I will make sure that other style, the pop, the whatever alternative rock space, that the sanctity of that is maintained.
Right. Very well said. Saptak, during the course of our interview, you mentioned something very interesting, which I want to actually get at. A lot of singer-songwriters are, a lot of artists in general out there, they try to, once in a while at leisure, put out covers on Instagram and, perform to very popular songs, which of course have such immense recall value. But what was admirable right now is when you confess that you produce your covers from scratch, you recreate an entire track. What I want to get at is, do you think you can pretty much just sing it with the basic harmonies or something? Because where I'm trying to get at is, why would someone put in that kind of effort when, rather cynics would argue that, why would you want to put that kind of effort in just making a cover? Like when you can invest your time and energies and, when you can invest less time and efforts and just about do that with basic harmony.
So the answer to this is, there are several layers to this answer. The first being, the most obvious one being, because I can. Let me explain that. Sure. I am also an audio engineer and music producer. That's the fourth part of what I do professionally. There's classical music, there's independent music, there's commercially film music, and then there's music production. Because I'm a music producer, I have to constantly evolve. I have to constantly keep doing it. I have to hone my skills. And whenever I get the chance, I like to put those skills to use. This is what I mean when I say because I can. Second reason is, I truly believe that in order to thrive in this industry, to survive, to have longevity, you need to go that extra mile. You need to do what most others will not be willing to do, or perhaps cannot do. Now, if they are not willing to do it, then it's 100% extra points for me, because I am willing to go that extra mile. If they don't have this skill set, then I only get 50% of the extra points, because my parents paid for my music production course and they were the ones who said, learn music production. I only get 50% because the rest of the 50%, which is studying it, putting my effort, time, energy, was my job to do, and I did it. So that's the second point, why I sort of, spend so much time and energy in recreating a cover. Third is, I feel there is every artist, when they put up a cover, they have their own character and feel and vibe to it that they get, right? Now, 9.9 9 out of 10 times a cover, when a singer puts out a cover, only the singing bit has their own character. But I have understood and realized that in this industry, the industry really rewards people who bring as much of them as possible to the table and still retain the original flavor. So not only do I try and bring some my own character through the singing, but I also try and do the same with the production, with the track that I produce. So for example, I produced one of Ritviz's tracks called Sage as a cover. Only yesterday did I discover that Sage is also being used in Miss Marvel, the new show on Hotstar, Disney Hotstar. I was so surprised. I had no idea Sage is used in that show. Otherwise, I would have promoted and marketed that cover a lot more, but it's okay. But so the cover that I produced for Sage, now I heard that cover, I must have heard it 100 times in order to be able to reproduce the cover, the track. And I made sure wherever possible, I added some twist of mine, which is not there in the original song. Both vocally, of course, there's a lot of things that's happening, but also the instrument track. Now, again, you might say that, oh, so Saptak, you have a point to prove to the industry. My answer to that is, yes, there is a small point that I'm trying to prove to the industry that, see, I am not your run-of-the-mill artist, and that I know a lot more than a lot of people. I can do a lot more, so give me opportunities. And the second thing is I'm trying to prove to myself that all these years that I've put in, what have they amounted to? I mean, I have put in a lot of effort. My parents have put in a lot of money. They have shown me unconditional support, encouragement, love. What is all that amounted to? So this I do to show myself that, okay, I can do this. So maybe there's a lot more that I still can do. There's a lot of other new skills that I can learn. If I learned this, I can learn something else as well. So which is why I said the answer has multiple layers.
But I'm glad you've answered all of it, because it's such a satisfying explanation, and it's such a satisfying viewpoint that you've put across.
Thank you.
After very quickly, who are some of the artists now in the current Indian independent music space that you immensely admire, and you ardently also listen to them?
Oh, so there's quite a few actually. There's When Chai Met Toast. I met those guys in 2019 when I went for the NH7 weekend. I was performing on a different stage, but we all shared the same backstage. And such sweet people, amazing musicians, and I love their music. So When Chai Met Toast, yeah, When Chai Met Toast is definitely right on top. Then there's Kamakshi. Kamakshi is an old friend. I don't know if you know this, but back in 2006, Kamakshi and I were part of the same choir, and we went to Austria to perform. We toured whole of Austria. Then we came back, we toured whole of India. This was with Pandit Ravi Shankarji, late Pandit Ravi Shankarji. So yeah, so Kamakshi is of course a fantastic musician and a very, very old friend.
Right.
Apart from that, there's Anand and Tanner. Anand Tanner is an electronic act from Delhi. Yes. I have, I've worked with them in the past. Again, old friends, very, very hardworking and super talented. It's a different kind of music. It's not what I make. It's not what I listen to on a daily basis. But whenever I do listen to it, that style, Anand and Tanner, is always there on my list. Apart from that,
I did love their last album that they last did.
Yeah, it was very nice. Apart from that, there are some new artists that I've discovered recently. There's Adarsh Rao. Okay. I discovered him through Spotify. There's Akanksha Sethi. I just discovered her a couple of days back. Very nice voice.
Yes.
Yeah. I was going through a Spotify playlist and I heard her song, and then I went down the rabbit hole, heard everything. Very nice. Then Zayden is, I quite enjoy Zayden's music.
Yeah.
It didn't start off with like that. I started off being a little apprehensive, but as I kept hearing it, it grew on me, and now I quite like it. Ritviz is very, very interesting. It's such a crazy sound and space that he's found. I really enjoy that.
That to conclude to conclude this interview, I would just want to ask about the beautiful opportunity and OTT that you got with getting to direct music for the Disney Hotstar show, the Lunch Stories. For both season 1 and season 2. So, do you want to quickly tell us about how did that opportunity land in your lap?
So I was in touch with the director Akash Goela, and since a very long time, and we kept discussing how we should sort of work together, how he really enjoys our music and he likes my voice, and I kept telling him that whenever an opportunity arises, I would love to work with him. So it started off with something small actually. We did a project long back. He was directing a short film, documentary of sorts, and I sang for it, and he really enjoyed it. And he said, "Hey, you know what? In a couple of months' time or a year, maybe I might be doing something for Disney Hotstar. Would you be up for it?" So I said, "Sure. I mean, why not? It's the first time I'll work on an OTT. Sure." So this happened during peak COVID, 2020, 2020 or 2021. I think this happened, 2021, last year. So yeah, he reached out. He said, "Hey, I'm making 2 films for Disney Hotstar. One is called Lunch Stories, and the other one is called God, I'm forgetting. What's the other one called? Date Story, I think. Lunch Story and Date Story. My God, I can't believe I'm forgetting. But anyway, so first we started with Lunch Stories. He said, if you have some songs unreleased, can you share those with me? Let's see if those fit or not. So I shared one song, and he said, fits perfectly well. Let's just tweak some bits to make it a little more, so that it fits the film a little more. So we did all of that, and then he asked if I would do the background score for the film as well. So that was a real exciting thing, because background scores is not what I do. It's not my area of expertise. So I had to really research, spend some time practicing it, and then actually doing the background score. And then came the second film. He said, "Do you again have a song which is ready, unreleased?" And it just happened that I did have a song which was almost completed, almost complete, unreleased, and it fit the vibe. So that worked out. Again, I had to modify it. I had to add a new section, sing some new vocal parts. All of that happened, and again, I did the background score for that film as well. And overall, it was a wonderful experience, because I also got to work with another singer. I got to work with another engineer, and of course, I sort of, my name comes on a Disney Hotstar show. So collectively, it was a wonderful experience, and everything happened remotely, because peak COVID. So it was all work from home. I worked from here. They were there in a Bombay studio, and then they came to a Delhi studio. So, all in all, it was a wonderful experience, and I just hope it happens again soon.
Lastly, Saptak, before we finally conclude, I just want to ask, you don't wear multiple hats in a way. You sing, you compose, you produce, and you also engineer. So, you handle so much of the engineering, audio engineering of your compositions. What is the most gratifying aspect? Of course, you've already mentioned, during the course of the interview, that just the joy of wanting to do something every day, get up and doing it, and putting your heart and soul behind what you love doing. I know it can't get better than that. But what is the ultimate? When is it that you would feel, that the journey has completed a 360 degree? Life has come 360 degree.
So, some projects feel easier than others. Some tracks are easier to sing than others, but those tracks which are the toughest to produce, which I just don't feel like doing it, because I know it's so difficult and I'll have a hard time doing it. It just takes me 4-5 days to just get myself to sit down to start doing it. Okay. But once I start doing it, fortunately, touch wood, thank God, till now, every time I've sort of picked up a project like that, which is difficult, or every time I've recorded a song like that, it has happened within, say, like 4-5 hours. And once it's finished, I'm just like, damn, I really did not think I could do it. But now that it's done, when I hear it back, it feels like, it feels like all that effort and all that work that I put in every day, it really does give results. It's not for nothing. And all of those moments where you think that, man, maybe this is out of my comfort zone, this is where my limit is, and then another voice in your head says, no, you need to like just stretch the limit just a little bit more, just one more day, just one more day, just once more, try one more time. And once it's done, I am just so glad. I'm exhausted, but I'm so glad that it happened, and it gives me so much confidence that, okay, you know what, if I could do it this time, maybe next time it'll be a little easier, and then after that it'll become even easier. So yeah, I mean, it's not when a song hits a million views that I feel the best. It's when these challenges, because I mean, if you put all the Instagram and all the covers and all the posts and all the films aside, at the end of it all, every artist is constantly challenging their artistry, right?
Yeah.
Every creator is challenging their creativity.
Yeah.
So when I'm challenging my creativity and when I come out on top, that feeling is unlike anything. It's an unparalleled happiness. So that's.
Well, onwards and upwards, Saptak. Keep creating, keep doing the music that you believe in, and we are always here to listen. Thank you so
Thank you
much
so
once
much.
again for being a part of the latest episode of On VJ's playlist, and I wish you all the very best. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I just want to take this moment and thank you for everything you're doing, because I mean, believe me, when we, the artists or our managers, whatever it is, when we're writing those emails out saying, hey, we've released new music, could you please put it on your playlist, or could you talk about it? And when we get that reply saying yes, I can't tell you how encouraging it is for us when we get a reply, because believe me, I have written hundreds and hundreds of emails after Aina released, and I must have gotten, it's the same with everybody. Uh, Ritwiz's manager writes 1,000 emails, they get 100 replies. I write 500 emails, I get 50 replies. It's the same thing everywhere. But
Right.
those 50 replies, yours was one of them. And it really fills an artist up with so much happiness and encouragement when we get a reply saying, hey, I've put the song on the playlist, or hey, do you want to do an interview, or hey, I'm doing something to push that song more. So thank you so much for taking your time and doing all of this for independent music and independent artists.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm really thankful for the wonderful words that you just said. Um, Kind of overwhelming, but it kind of gives me also the strength to go about doing my thing. Um, Thank you so much once again, Saptak. Thank you.